Our idea of history, the idea that the human story is a process with a purpose, is another idea that comes to us from the Abrahamic tradition. In common speech, we often use history as a synonym for event. To say that France has a history means simply that France has been around for a long time and things have happened there. When many people first heard the title of Francis Fukuyama's book, The End of History and the Last Man, they assumed it was a kind of history which Fukuyama said was over, and they found his position meaningless, incomprehensible, and absurd. How could history, that is the sessions of events, be an end? That could happen only if everyone and everything were dead, in which case there could be no books on the topics and no discussion. That was not, of course, what Fukuyama meant. He was referring to the Abrahamic history as the name for a period in the human story in which certain problems needed to be solved. History, in this sense, is not synonymous with the full term of human existence. History is a period and a process through which humanity solves certain set of problems before moving on the next and higher stage in existence. And even in everyday speech, we pay lip service to this idea, distinguishing between prehistorical times and history. The story of what people did once they became organized enough to write and keep records of passing events. Prehistory simply the next stage when human civilization passes through changes as profound and fundamental as the invention of writing or the development of agriculture, or as the original called it, Abraham. Thinkers like Fukuyama, who speculate on the end of history, are asking what the goal of the historical process is, and then looking around to see if we have reached it yet. It is hard to overstate the importance of this idea of history to the Abrahamic religion and ideology. Abrahamic religions and political movements largely define themselves by their interpretation of the meaning of history, and their approaches share a common structure. From the biblical narrative to the present day, Abrahamic cultures largely see human story as a consistent of three stages: prehistory, history, and post-history. The standard Christian story begins on a high note: the creation of the world and the placement of Adam and Eve in the prehistoric Garden of Eden. Then comes the fall, a decline to savagery and barbarity as human crimes multiply, and ignorant and ill-equipped and ignorant human beings scratch a skimpy living from their reluctant earth. For Christians, this story says that the origins of history was the fall. Naming animals and communing with God in the garden was prehistory. Scratching in the fields and building cities take us into history. Up to this point, the trajectory of the human story has been downward. But instead of abandoning Adam, Eve, and their descendants to the consequences of their shortcoming, God acts to put the world back on track. He reaches out to Noah, to Abraham, to Moses, and the prophets. He builds a people for himself, the ancient Hebrews, the descendants of Abraham, and the ancestors of the Jews of today, and makes his will known primarily to this people, but also send hints and imitations of his existence and his desires to all people of the earth. He completes this process with full revelation of his nature and plan. Christians believe in the person, teaching, and the work of Jesus of Nazareth. In the classic Christian view, history is the records of God's action on the fallen humanity. Its purpose is redemption, the return of humanity to its proper state of communion with God. As such, history divides into stages. There are two big ones, before and after Christ, as signaled in the Christian calendar's division of history into BC and AD. There are also smaller subdivisions in both halves of history as the divine plans unfold. In this view, history is not an eternal process. Christ will return to the earth at some point in the future according to the Christian teaching and institute the kingdom of God. That will be the end of history. History, in this view, is not just a passage of time, it is an accomplishment of a task. Something is wrong with the world, and the world has been wounded. History is the process by which what is wrong is set right, what is broken is mended. History may look chaotic and meaningless, but everything that happens is ultimately part of the healing process, and its accumulation will come with the establishment of a new world without the evil and suffering of our current existence. While there are, of course, many important differences in the outline, the Jews and Islamic views of history are structurally very similar to the Christian plan. But we see history as a process of God's progressive self-manifestation to human beings that climaxes with definitive revelations and ends with a definitive act of God still in the future that brings history to an end by establishing God's perfect society among human beings once and for all. The three religions, offsprings of Abraham, quarrel bitterly and frequently violently about the details, but they agree that this is the basic story that reveals the nature and the meaning of human life. The rise of Abrahamic religion means that these ideas, too, are shaping the consciousness of more and more people in the 21st century of the Christian era.